Siamo? Mi sentite? Ah, perfetto. Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our masterclass, which is devoted tonight to indigenous grapes, organized by Coldiretti in cooperation with its member wineries. We're going to watch a video as an introduction. It will take 3 minutes of our time, and then I will just give a short introduction to the topic of tonight.
Italian wine is strongly linked with the different production territories, with the native vines, with our millenary history. Italian wine is culture, art, tradition, landscapes, cooperation, biodiversity. Italy is the first country in the world for wine production. The average production is 36 million hectoliters per year. There are 650,000 hectares of vineyards, of which about 110,000 hectares are in organic cultivation. 11 billion in production turnover, of which 6.3 from exports. 20 million hectoliters of wines exported to 130 countries. 15 billion total turnover. In the world, 1 bottle out of 5 of exported wine is made in Italy. Wine is the main ambassador of Made in Italy agri-food in the world. In Italy, there are 200,000 companies operating in the sector, of which 3,000 wine producers and over 1 billion employees. Italy ranks first in the world for the number of labels guaranteeing the quality and origin of a wine. 76 controlled and guaranteed designation of origin and 332 controlled designation of origin have been recognized. 118 typical geographical indication and 608 different registered wine grape varieties, of which over 550 are native. The history of Italian wine is the history of an indissoluble bond. The territory and the people who with their work take care of it. The history of Italian wine is a history of excellence.
Buonasera a tutti.
So, good evening, everyone.
Mostrare
Precisely what the video would like to show is the special situation of Italy, the patchwork of terroirs running north to south. With this tasting today, we're going to travel more or less north to south. We will cross several wine areas. We'll start with bubbles, with sparkling wines, spumantes, just to highlight the regional specificities and typicities in a glass. We'll be talking about native grapes and
diverse varietà.
Different grape varieties and different nutrients. We're going to start with Glera grapes, the first two
Poi andremo avanti con
wines, and then we'll continue with Lambrusco.
Continueremo con un pecorino nella
We
zona
will
dell'Abruzzo.
continue with a pecorino in the area of the Abruzzi. So we'll go from Treviso towards the Emilia-Romagna and then to the Abruzzi, where pecorino is made. And then we will go to the area of Irpinia and Piemonte. Okay, we'd like to start with the first glass. The first wine is from Tenuta Amadio. I'm not sure whether the producer is with us. This is the wine that we're going to taste. We're talking about Method Charmat. The grape is Glera, semi-aromatic, white grapes. This is Charmat, and the importance of taking good care of the grapes. That's a highlight with Charmat. And then we will see a difference compared to the Lambrusco, which is a Metodo Classico, like a Champenois. So the first is Asolo Prosecco Superiore DOCG at the heart of the Asolo Hills. I'm not sure whether the producer is online with us. I think Michele from Tenuta Amadio. Okay, let's see if he's connected with us.
Video? No. Vabbè, niente. Allora, la prima degustazione, quindi abbiamo Tenuta Amadio, siamo nei colli.
So we have Tenuta Amadio on the Asolo Hills, which are rolling, gentle hills with gentle slopes and wonderful day-night temperature differential, which is all important for these grapes and wines made using the Charmat method. We're talking about Glera, as I mentioned. This wine wants to emphasize the fruit, so the Charmat method is very refreshing, and it is fermented in a pressurized tank for approximately 9 days, and then what the lees generally give off in a Metodo Classico is not present in this wine because there's no contact with the yeasts. So the vineyards are located at approximately 200 meters above sea level. They produce 300,000 bottles, more or less, 30 hectares. They take maniac care of their vineyards. The vines are tended manually. The residual sugar is 8 grams per liter. It's a brut. Now, I think you can tell how savory it is with these hints of pear, of lemons and oranges, the tropical fruit, and like a drive to make the fruit more important. They're exporting primarily to South America, Thailand, and they're starting to export to the USA. Now, the beauty of this wine lies in its freshness. And the fruit, which is all forward. We recommend it as an aperitif. It is a wine that's meant to be easy to drink, with a very prominent fruit forward. And as an aperitif, it can go with fish, raw fish. And the serving temperature is 6 to 8 degrees. I think we can move on to the second wine, if you all agree. The second is Antonio Fachin. It's 7 siblings in the area of Treviso. It's a Prosecco Rosé. and it's a sparkling wine. It's a time-honored estate in San Paolo di Piave, approximately 150 years of history, and it's in the area of the Piave River, which is mitigating the presence of the Dolomites right next to the estate. Now, the owners of the estate say they are growers and producers at the same time, so they control the entire production process end to end. And in the Champagne area, it would be récoltant manipulant. So it's the growers who process and sell, so 0 to 100%. So what's special about this wine? Of course, the climate with the mitigation effect that the Piave River is having, countering the cold currents from the Dolomites. So you have a crisp, fresh acidity as a result of this combination. This wine is also characterized by the presence of a proportion of Pinot Nero, 13 to 15%. Pinot Nero, on top of giving off some of its color with the anthocyanins, it will also impart this very elegant note. Therefore, in the glass, you will find the freshness of the fruit, and we're still talking about the Charmat, and a slight red fruit note, red berry note that tends to an undertone towards the finish. So as I said, freshness, fruit. Okay, do we have anyone from the winery, like Antonio Facchina? Anyone who can tell us something about the winery? Apparently not. What we are tasting now is a Rosé Brut, 5 grams per liter. We're talking about residual sugar. When we talk about Charmat, we're talking about residual sugar. After the end of the fermentation, that's what you measure. And then the nose is very, very intense. It is fresher, but with these nuances of red fruit. Hello, there's someone connected. Good evening. Good evening. I'm Michele from Tenuta Amadio, so I've got nothing to do with Antonio Facchin. But if you want, I can go back to the description of our 3 Brut wines. I know it was previously in the flight you are tasting, so I can describe it. So we're still talking about the previous wine. I've had a few connection problems. Okay, that's okay. Yes, we tasted it. First of all, welcome. Good evening. Okay, we'd like to hear from you about your winery, your vineyards, their exposures, and your production. Tell us more about who you are. We tasted the Brut at 8 grams per liter with a very nice savoriness and freshness in the glass because of the Charmat process. Well, when it comes to Tenuta Amadio, it's pretty recent. It was established in 2015, but we are becoming big in Asolo, and that is our objective, big in terms of fame. We have a range of DOCG wines that has received many international recognitions, gold medals for our Brut and extra dry, the crown of Italy for our Brut, and then the non-vintage received other awards. As far as we're concerned, we practice sustainable agriculture from the vineyard to the winery. And the winery is just a jewel of the crown because it was built in 2013, so it's brand new. And we're pretty happy of the results, with the results that we are receiving, that we are reaping domestically and internationally. When it comes to Brut and Extra Brut, these are our flagship products that sort of distinguish Asolo because our terroir is rich of minerality that then goes into the wine. And that characterizes our Prosecco, and that will be the plus that will propel us towards the premium quality that we are so keen on. One last question about the commercial appeal, that is what we have tasted. In what we tasted, I said it's a wine for appetizers because of its crispy character and its freshness and the fruit. Yes, absolutely. As far as Extra Brut and Brut are concerned, we tend to use them as a wine for a whole meal, but we're seeing both in Italy and abroad that our wines are increasingly used as an aperitif. The Extra Brut is a gastronomic wine, a wine for an entire meal, very fresh and mineral, with an aftertaste of tropical fruit, apples and pears. And the Brut, because the sugar is higher, 3 grams per liter versus 8 in this case, we are more thinking of aperitifs. It's fresh and crisp, as you said. They're very, very perceptible, just like its minerality. With the Brut, it's no longer a matter of apples and pears, it's more about citrus fruit. We were talking about green apples and a very perceivable citrus fruit. And so it's the same taste actually as our indigenous apples, and it grows actually on the same soils as our vineyards. Thank you, thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Quindi andiamo al secondo.
Okay, our second wine.
Andiamo al secondo quindi con la degustazione del rosé. Dicevamo sempre questo.
We were tasting this rosé. It's got a very interesting nose because of the production method. The residual sugar is slightly lower than the previous sample. We're talking about 5 milligrams per liter. But on the palate, you find again the fruit, the green apple, with this nuance veering towards red currant and raspberry because of the Pinot Noir or Pinot Nero that gives it some backbone. And then it's very creamy compared to the previous sample, with a slightly drier finish than the previous wine. Now, this estate exports to the US, Norway and Asia.
Quello che si può fare un cenno di pairing di
Now, thinking of pairings for this wine, it could be crustaceans, or risottos with red radicchio and sausage. That will help because we must all be very hungry. Okay. Third wine, again a very recently established winery, in this case Emilia-Romagna. It's in the province of Modena, Cantina 2020, which was established and the construction of which was completed in 2020, a very special year, I think you will agree. They are based to the north of the city of Modena, and they have 45 hectares and 8 local varietals. In this case, it's Lambrusco, a Lambrusco di Modena. There are various strains. In this case, you have Lambrusco di Sorbara, 100%. We have different Lambrusco di Modena varietals, Salamino di Santa Croce, Graspa Rossa di Castelvetro, and Sorbara. In this case, the rosé is made from Sorbara, metodo classico brut, so we're talking about dosage and no longer about residual sugar. This winery is carrying out bottle fermentation. So again, it's the Champenois method, or classico in Italian. The wine spends approximately 30 months on the lees, and it is disgorged in the first 6 months of the year. Lambrusco Sorbara it comes from this area of clay soils, and so you will find a red fruit and a lot of citrus fruit and a very nice saltiness because of the proximity to the sea as well. It's not overlooking the sea, but it's not so far. Okay, so there is a difference in complexity on the nose as well. And the bubbles are much finer than before. But there's also, from a style perspective, a different complexity because of this production method. Again, this winery has opted for a classic method, or metodo classico, i.e. bottle fermentation. They're very respectful of nature and biodiversity. They will use no pesticides, no weed killers. It's all organic. And they will use photovoltaic electricity for their business uses. So you can detect a very good acidity, a very nice structure to this wine. And then you have red fruit and a very nice flower bouquet. In this case, the pairings are more complex and they will go over the entire meal. Especially if it's fat food, like fat salmon, because this wine will cleanse the mouth very effectively. Or local cured meats, cheeses with more structure, and focaccia. Yes, it's fresh and it's very fragrant. But it's also very well structured and complex because of the time it has spent on the lees. A very nice balance to the palate. It lingers, it is persistent, it is delicate, it is very refined. So again, metodo classico, bottle fermentation. It's 3 siblings who decided to build this winery, the cellars. And again, it started its operation in 2020. Unless there are no questions or remarks from either here or the people connected with us, I will continue with the fourth wine. Okay, that's the end of the Spumanti. We're going to move now to the Abruzzi. Azienda Vinicola Talamonti. Do we have anyone from the company? No.
Azienda viticola Talamonti si trovano in Abruzzo.
The Azienda Vinicola Talamonti is in the Abruzzi, so it's Abruzzo DOC Pecorino, 100% Pecorino, and it's one of the varietals admitted to produce Abruzzo DOC. Again, we're talking about a region where there are several varietals. A few of them are native, most of them actually are native, and this one is Pecorino. And this wine contains a proportion of at least 80 to 85% of Pecorino. The vineyards are planted generally with 80 to 85% Pecorino. It's a very diverse region with many natural parks, the Apennines, so the range right next to the Mediterranean that mitigates the climate at certain elevations with very nice day-night temperature differentials. In terms of soil, this is an ideal soil for Pecorino.
Questo vino si chiama Trabocchetto.
The wine is called Trabocchetto from Trabocco, Trabocco being a special type of net, a fishing net. The Trabocchi are used in the area of the Abruzzi, and they are fishing nets that would be used with very bad weather. So they would be ideal tonight in Milan where it's raining, actually pouring. The trabocchetti are the arms that keep the nets in place, hence probably the name of the wine. This wine received rather high ratings from wine enthusiasts and decanter, 90 and 91, I think. And we're talking about protective vinification. The texture and the aromas are hence extracted to a major degree. And thanks to precision viticulture, the fruit is preserved almost intact, and it has a very interesting acidity supporting the aromas. The texture is very soft to the palate, and it's got a very fresh acidity. And then some very pleasant pear notes and white flesh fruit, jasmines. It is fermented in steel fermenters, and so it preserves a lot of fruit. That is a choice that the winery made to preserve the fruit. And then it spends 2 months cellaring in the bottle. It has some very interesting apple nuances, but ripe apples in this case, but with a beautiful acidity pinpointing it. Again, in terms of pairings, I would recommend some shellfish, seafood, perhaps smoked mackerel, or fowl, I mean chicken or turkey, and the Abruzan cheeses that are an ideal match for this wine. So in terms of style, this winery is interested in preserving the aromatic freshness of the varietal, which is rather aromatic, almost sweet, but that ripens slightly earlier than the other varietals. From an olfactory perspective, the winery has managed to preserve this freshness, although the varietal is hard to manage from an aromatic perspective. I think you can all hear the heavy rain. We're in the midst of a rainstorm here. Okay, the next two wineries now. It's going to be 2 bottles from Piedmont, and 2 from Irpinia. I think you can still hear me. Okay, we're traveling back north again to Piemonte. The winery is at Giacomo Vico, and we have Roero Arneis, so we're in the area of Roero and Langhe, Piemonte or Piedmont. And then we will go to Irpinia, back south again with more volcanic soils and a totally different temperature range. We'll taste a Greco di Tufo. Then we'll go back to Piemonte again, same winery. We'll taste their Nebbiolo delle Langhe, and we'll finish off with an Aglianico. The Aglianico being the varietal when it comes to Irpinia. Irpinia being a region that is across the border between Campania and Basilicata. And it's a wine of with a rich structure. Okay, we're going to start this final leg of the tasting of the flight with Giacomo Vico's Roero Arneis. The designations rulebook prescribes that it has to be 95% Arneis grapes. Again, this is a very nice representation of Italy's wealth of indigenous grapes that we can really feel proud of. Again, we are in the Roero area, southern Piemonte, and it's an area of hills on the left bank of the Tanaro River to the north of the city of Alba. It's a very lush area, and one special thing about it are the cliffs in the Roero that are really very recognizable, and they also mark the borders between one type of soil and the next. In 2014, Roero became part of the UNESCO World Heritage List. So again, this the first wine from Vico is a Roero Arneis. This soil is characterized by a high proportion of sand. On one hand we have sand, on the other hand we have a different texture. So it's 2 areas, 2 different elevations, and vineyards that face south. The winery was taken over in the 1990s by the 3 children of the founder, and it was modernized to improve the vinification processes. As of today, It cultivates approximately 17 hectares, of which 15 are distributed in the area of Vezza d'Alba, Canale. A nice thing about this winery is that it is an ancient cellar. Actually, before it was renovated, it was entirely underground in order to have the right level of humidity for aging. In 2010, it was enlarged to increase the production volumes. Slightly, however. This is 100% Arnese. It is very fresh. It only takes some time in steel tanks. No oak at all. So again, the fruit and the acidity that are very clearly perceivable. But the bouquet is very gentle, delicate. It's yellow sloes and gooseberry. But it has a very nice herbaceous note to it, a lot of freshness. So freshly mowed grass. This works perfectly for aperitifs, paired with cheeses, not too ripe, however, not too aged, because it's a wine that is all, again, fruit forward. And it wants to play up the delicate aromas that are typical of this varietal. So again, aperitifs, fresh cheeses, nothing complex. It's meant to be uncorked and consumed immediately. Okay, there's also a Riserva version of the same that we're not going to taste, that spends some time in oak, and when it's oaked, because it's oak aged, its structure and complexity will be totally different. And so you will have more toasted notes and vanilla notes. It's a wine that is ideal for drinking when still young. And then we're moving to Irpinia down south. We're going to taste white wine first, and then they're red. Here it is a Greco di Tufo. We're in Campania. We're still talking about native or indigenous grape varieties. The name of the winery is Azienda Agricola Calafè, and there's someone here live. And we can finally ask questions to someone. Hello. Hello. I gave just a short introduction, a short intro. Tonight we'll be tasting your white Greco di Tufo, and we'll finish the flight with your Aglianico. Can you tell us more about your winery, Calafè, how it was founded? And there's something in the name even that is pretty special, the name Calafè. It's the initials of the names of our daughters. I think he said Carolina, Laura and Federica are the names of his daughters, and so he took the first two letters of each name. Actually, it's not his daughters, it's his granddaughters. The sound is not very clear, she's saying. Unfortunately, we're having a few problems with our connections. Now, we are in the area of the sulfur mines.
Mi sento un po' male.
C'era la voce che non arriva bene. Non riuscite a capire?
Okay, it's hard for the people in the room in Milan to hear him because it's raining and it's very noisy, so it's hard to hear what he's saying.
Sentiamo meglio.
No, non abbiamo le cuffie.
Niente cuffiette.
Niente.
Okay, so then
Così, proviamo adesso si capisce forse meglio.
Dovrebbe essere qui in partenza sembra che la voce vada bene. Nelle ricezioni poi forse non funzionerà. Che poi c'è questo problema stasera che non si riesce a comunicare.
well, tonight it's hard to communicate. Well, you know, at times we can hear you, so let's give it a try.
Si trovano su una
So-
miniera di zolfo.
The vineyards are planted on a former sulfur mine, and so that is very perceptible in the wine. Ours is
Con un ambiente di temperature
an area where the temperatures are very high in the summer and very cool from the evening on.
Si capisce. Sì, sì.
Se lei mi vuol fare delle domande sarebbe un po'
Feel free to ask me questions. Okay, I would like you to tell us how your winery was created. Again, Calafé, you said, comes from the initials of our three granddaughters.
è nato e noi stiamo anche dedicando i vini
And we're also dedicating our wines to our granddaughters. We have a rosé called Laura, we have a sparkling wine called Kami, and then we are going to release a barrique aged, long-aged Greco, which will bear Federica's name. Now, what's very special about your production is the volcanic soil, rich in sulfur. In our soil, there's a lot of sulfur. The volcanic origin is also combined with the inroads that the Sabato River. So there is an effect on the part of the Sabato River which shaped the valleys across this volcanic area. How many hectares? We have 4 hectares for Greco alone. And then the other characteristic of Irpinia is that your winters are very cold and your summers are very hot and sunny. Yes, that is true, but then in the evening the temperatures go down quickly. So you have big daytime, nighttime temperature differentials and volcanic soils. So the volcanic character of the soil is perceptible in the glass. So your harvest season begins late, yes, towards the 20th of October. Now let's talk about the Greco that we're going to taste. It's in the area of where the tufa is. Yes, we are on the left bank of the river Sabato, where the temperature differentials are even wider. We're going to taste Greco di Tufo and Aglianico. Both of them take some time. I mean, are stored in steel. No, not at all.
Noi abbiamo mandato una bottiglia del 2019.
We sent to you bottles from the 2019 vintage, and this Greco is also aged. It's a different bottle. We call it Aria Vecchia, and that ages for 10-11 years. Although it's a white wine, it takes an extensive aging. So this Greco is fresh, but also age-worthy and long-lived. I mean, because of its prominent acidity. Straw color, straw yellow color. That's a natural color of Greco. There is honey, pears, apricots, and ripe fruit on the nose. And perhaps a hint of almonds. Yes, almonds are the most characterizing descriptor. And then if you can really bring it to your nose, there's a lot of sulfur coming out of the glass because of the soil. It's not a shy wine. No, absolutely. No. And you cannot drink it the year when it is produced. It takes at least 2 years before it becomes drinkable. In terms of pairings, it works wonderfully with fish and shellfish, rabbit, chicken. And it works also very well with artichokes, because artichokes don't go well with artichokes. Artichokes don't work well with wine, but this one is just wonderful with artichokes. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Okay, at last it worked out. Now, in short, the project started in 1999 when they planted the 2 hectares of vineyards on volcanic soil. Irpinia is special when it comes to native grapes, Aglianico, Greco di Tufo, and the area of the Sabato River and the tufa that is found in the valley. The acidity in this wine is all ascribable to the very nice temperature differentials that are typical in this area. Again, as you've heard, in the summer, the days are very hot and it's cool at night. Again, the tufa and the sulfur deposits also make a big difference. Sulfur is also some sort of defense against fungi and grapevine diseases in general.
Torniamo poi alla zona del Roero.
Now, back to the Roero area, near the Langhe. We're talking about Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo, 100% Nebbiolo. Nebbiolo being the king of varietals. It was the wine served at royal dinners, so it was extremely important. And it is an indigenous wine of international relevance. The bunches are very tight and the skin is very poor in anthocyanins. as you can tell from the color, but it's very rich in tannins. So in the glass, you will find certain characteristics. Winemaking needs to be very attentive, needs to be very careful of not playing up the tannins that would impart a bitterish note to the wine. This wine is very fresh and fragrant, with hints of plums, strawberries, cherries, and violets, which is typical of Nebbiolo. And then on the palate, it is tannic, but the tannins are very gentle. It has some light spice, sweet spice, I would say. This one takes 6 months in still, 6 months in larger oak casks, and 4 months in the bottle. And then it is released. It is very elegant. Again, this is Piemonte and another indigenous varietal. One of the characteristics that marks this one in particular is the sandy soil that it grows on. Typical pairings would be with the Piedmontese cuisine, the typical pasta courses of Piemonte, which happens to be fresh pasta containing eggs, and then some Piedmontese cheeses, or the meat courses that are typical of Piemonte. And we're going to finish off with Irpinia again. And we're now going to talk about Campania's red wine par excellence, the best known, with a great structure and great longevity. The vines in this case are approximately 30 years old, and the vineyards are over 60. So we are tasting Aglianico DOC with this very intense ruby red. You can tell the big difference between Nebbiolo and Aglianico. The anthocyanins that are very not so colorful in the Nebbiolo, while in the Aglianico they are a lot more visible. It's a much deeper ruby red color, this Aglianico. To the nose it has red fruit, red berries, blueberries, cherries, rose petals. Both wines are stored in steel tanks, and although this is a richly structured wine, it is still very fresh. With perceptible tannins, but very delicate. And it all comes from the very nice temperature differentials that are typical of the Irpinia region. Very crisp, and I would say straightforward. In this case, the pairings would be the typical pairings of the area, with rich dishes that are typical of Piemonte. So we went north to south and then back north and south again to talk about special regional varietals. And many of these producers are exporting, some of them in the Netherlands, others in Europe only, others in South America, others to the United States. But the title of the Masterclass brings us back to the regional level and the very special indigenous varietals that are very common in Italy. We've been talking about individual varietals of soils, of terroirs, and the commercial appeal of the wine as well, how it can be consumed and how it can be sold as an aperitif or as an accompaniment for a dish. Again, the idea is that Italy is a patchwork of different terroirs. We've been talking about clay, limestone, volcanic soils, and many different elements, different elevations as well. Many of these wines have an elevation and a thermal differential supporting their acidity that makes this wine easier to age. That makes these wines easier to age. Okay, unless you have questions about the wines. Unfortunately, it's not the best of times for our connections. It's still pouring heavily here in Milan.
Abbiamo ancora collegati?
Do we still have people online to take any questions?
Ci sono domande o da parte del... Siamo in collegamento diretto con Miami e Toronto, quindi...
Okay, are there any questions from Miami or Toronto? If you have any questions from where you are, just please let me know.
Ci sono domande in arrivo da lassù? No, da laggiù.
Okay, I see no questions. Okay.
Ci sono domande qua in aula? Siamo qua per rispondere.
Okay, unless you have questions from the room here, I think it's time to close. I think you'll all agree.
Stanno bevendo i nostri stessi vini, sì.
The question is, are the people abroad drinking the same wines as us? Yes, we were live connected to Miami and Toronto to talk about Italy's native grapes. Hello, America. Hello, Canada. Hi, everyone.
Let's have a toast.
Okay, let's have a toast. Everybody, raise your glasses. I hope you can see us. Let's have a toast. Oh, good, good. Thank you. Okay, take your favorite glass. Cheers. So thank you for listening. It was a pleasure having you with us.